The story begins in Colombia, during the chaotic aftermath of a powerful mafia boss being eliminated. Police swarm the area and surround a luxury hotel connected to the crime scene. Hoping to close the case quickly, the authorities decide to search only those guests who appear to be traveling alone. Inside the hotel lobby, John Smith quietly reaches behind his back, instinctively ready to react. At that exact moment, a woman, Jane Smith, steps through the entrance. She subtly slides a concealed dagger back into its hiding place, careful not to attract attention. Their eyes meet across the lobby just as a flash of lightning illuminates the room. For a brief moment, everything freezes. Both of them immediately recognize the situation. Each has been seconds away from drawing a weapon. Instead, they make a silent decision. The tension dissolves as they casually move toward one another and slip into an embrace, pretending to be a couple. Arm in arm, they walk calmly past the police and leave the hotel together. Neither of them knows who the other really is. But somehow they have just survived a deadly situation side by side. Later that night, drinks start flowing. One round becomes two, then three. The atmosphere grows warmer, more relaxed. Jane tosses her empty glass aside with a carefree motion, and suddenly neither of them feels any urge to end the evening. They dance together. Even when rain begins pouring outside, they remain beneath a small shelter, continuing their conversation and sharing more drinks as the night stretches on. The following morning, Jane wakes up somewhere unfamiliar. For a moment she looks around, confused. Then she notices something surprising. The mysterious man from the previous night has already prepared breakfast. It feels strangely natural. People often say love at first sight happens in a single moment, but for them it was different. That first glance had planted something deeper, something neither of them could quite explain. Before long, they decide to get married. When John tells one of his close friends, the reaction is disbelief. After all, the two have only known each other for 6 months. Jane receives a similar response when she shares the news with her own friends. To them, the relationship feels rushed, almost reckless. From Jane's perspective, John is simply a contractor. From John's perspective, Jane works as a computer engineer. Neither has the faintest idea what the other actually does for a living. Their friends predict the marriage won't survive more than half a year, but time proves them wrong. In what feels like the blink of an eye, 5 or 6 years pass. One day, a package lands outside John Smith's front door. Over the years, they've built a comfortable life together. On the surface, everything seems stable and happy, yet beneath that routine, something has quietly changed. The excitement that once filled their relationship has faded into monotony. Arguments now spark over the smallest things. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., they leave the house together, but even something as simple as the path outside their door can trigger a petty disagreement. Each evening follows a familiar pattern. Jane usually arrives home first and prepares a full dinner, carefully setting the table. Meanwhile, John backs the car into the garage and slips his wedding ring back onto his finger before walking inside. To anyone watching, they appear like the perfect couple, but subtle cracks are starting to show. One evening, Jane mentions she bought new curtains for the house. John responds with a distracted nod, barely acknowledging her excitement. Later, when it starts raining, John casually shows off his impressive ball handling skills while taking out the trash, as if practicing alone for no one in particular. Jane has her own hidden side as well. Whenever John isn't around, she moves with startling agility, crossing spaces with the kind of speed and balance that would make it seem as though she could leap across rooftops if she wanted to. At night they lie in bed reading separate newspapers. Conversations grow shorter with each passing week. Silence slowly becomes their routine. Both of them are hiding something. One day, Jane dresses in a sleek black trench coat, clearly preparing to leave for work. As she heads out, John reminds her they're expected at their neighbor's house for dinner that evening. Jane reassures him she'll return in time. John, however, also has somewhere he needs to be. After leaving the house, Jane stops outside a hotel and steps out of her car. John drives in a completely different direction, toward a lively bar. Inside the hotel, Jane is escorted by a pair of bodyguards to an extravagant private room. Meanwhile, John walks into the bar and moves through the crowd until he reaches the casino area hidden inside. He pushes open a door where a poker game is underway, but the table is missing one player. 3 men glance at him with irritation and tell him the seat is already taken. John insists. One of the men subtly reveals a gun, hoping that will settle the matter. John responds by calmly placing a stack of cash on the table. Money talks. Back in the hotel suite, Jane's mission takes a bold turn. She stands in front of Marco Rassin, slowly removing her trench coat. Her hairpin slides free, allowing her hair to fall elegantly around her shoulders. Across town, John blends perfectly into the gambling environment. He appears relaxed, almost amused as he continues losing hand after hand. Oddly enough, he seems to be enjoying it. Right at that moment, the man who was supposed to occupy the seat finally arrives. That's when the truth becomes clear. John Smith isn't just another gambler. He is actually the top assassin working for a powerful assassination organization. At the same time, in the hotel room, Jane stands face to face with Marco Rassin. Though restrained, the man seems strangely exhilarated by the encounter. But there's another revelation. Jane Smith is also an assassin, and the two of them work for rival organizations. After completing her task, Jane quickly slips her trench coat back on and prepares to leave just before security begins closing in. Her backpack briefly catches on a metal lamp stand as she moves, but she manages to free it and sprint toward the exit. Moments later, she leaps from the building. Dropping from the high-rise, she lands smoothly beside a waiting taxi. After adjusting her hair and composure, she casually heads home as if nothing unusual happened. That evening, both John and Jane attend the neighbor's dinner party. Inside the house, the men gather together discussing work and business matters. In another corner, the women chat about relationships and everyday life. One woman proudly mentions her husband recently received a promotion. She jokingly asks Jane if she would be willing to help watch the kids sometime. Jane smiles politely, though motherhood clearly isn't something she has ever seriously considered. Later that night, John steps into the garage. Once the door closes, he reveals a hidden entrance leading down into a secret underground room. This concealed basement is filled with weapons, equipment, and stacks of cash. This is where the real John Smith operates. He begins packing a box with various tools and supplies. It looks like he'll be traveling soon. Upstairs, at the exact same time, Jane quietly prepares for her own mission. For a brief moment she pauses, reflecting on something strange. After years of living like a normal wife, cooking meals, and maintaining a household, she suddenly wonders why she ever allowed herself to settle into that life in the first place. Inside their quiet suburban home, Jane's ordinary kitchen hides something far from ordinary. What looks like a simple dishwasher suddenly reveals its true purpose. With a subtle mechanism, hidden compartments slide open, exposing rows of pistols, knives, and other deadly tools. The appliance is not for cleaning dishes, it's an armory. Jane begins preparing for her next assignment. Across the house, John's workspace also conceals secrets. At first glance, it appears to be a normal office, but the walls slowly shift and two screens rise from hidden panels. Classified information fills the displays, revealing his newest contract. The mission target is Benjamin Dance. Dance is currently being held by military intelligence and will soon be transported across the border to a federal prison. John's task is simple in theory: intercept the transfer and eliminate the prisoner before he ever reaches the facility. Meanwhile, Jane receives the same assignment. Her workplace, however, looks completely different from John's underground setup. Her organization operates out of a sleek, high-tech headquarters, filled with staff members and assistants working around her. Jane is clearly not operating alone. She commands an entire team. Yet the target remains exactly the same: Benjamin Dance. Because the operation must remain secret, both organizations have identified only one possible point of attack during the prisoner's transfer. That means whoever strikes first will get the only chance. As the convoy transporting Dance moves through a remote desert region, Jane positions herself on a distant hillside, setting up her rifle and monitoring the road through high-powered optics. Everything is ready, then something unexpected happens. Through her binoculars, Jane notices movement in the empty landscape below. A lone figure suddenly appears in the barren terrain. Suspicious, she studies the stranger more closely. The man accidentally bumps into a piece of her infrared surveillance equipment, nearly revealing her location. Jane quickly repositions and raises the binoculars again, trying to identify him. Something about the way he moves feels strangely familiar. Down below, the convoy carrying Benjamin Dance approaches the attack zone. At that exact moment, the mysterious man lifts a bazooka onto his shoulder. Jane instantly raises her rifle, preparing to intervene if necessary. She realizes someone else is attempting the same assassination. The man slowly rises and stares angrily toward a small cabin halfway up the hill. For a brief second, Jane sees his posture clearly. Her heart skips. The silhouette looks exactly like someone she knows. Before she can process the thought further, everything goes wrong. An explosive device Jane planted earlier suddenly detonates too early, triggering chaos before either assassin can properly execute the plan. The blast ruins both operations instantly. With the mission compromised, Jane abandons her sniper position and escapes on a motorcycle, racing across the desert to avoid being captured. John, meanwhile, rushes toward the nearby cabin he had been using as a launch point. But when he arrives, all that remains is the shattered remains of a computer system, Any evidence of the operation has been destroyed. Both assassins have failed their missions. They return separately to their respective organizations to explain what happened. Determined to understand how the mission collapsed, John traces the origin of the destroyed computer equipment. The investigation leads him to the dealer who supplied it, but when he checks the purchase records, he freezes. The registered recipient is Jane Smith, his wife. Confusion floods his mind. For 6 years, he believed Jane was simply a computer engineer. At the same time, Jane is experiencing a similar shock. Back in her office, she reviews the surveillance footage from the desert operation. Watching the mysterious figure on the hillside again, she studies the body language and the confident stance. The realization hits her like a thunderbolt. That man, that unmistakable posture, it was John, her husband. Slowly, the truth becomes impossible to deny. They are both assassins, and worse, they work for rival organizations. Later that evening, John quietly slips his wedding ring back onto his finger and returns home. His mind is racing, struggling to accept the reality that the woman he has lived with for 6 years has been hiding the same deadly profession. Jane feels exactly the same. At dinner, the atmosphere is painfully tense. Jane pours wine for them both, but John subtly avoids drinking it. Instead, he discreetly dumps the liquid away when she isn't looking. If they truly belong to opposing companies, there is only one logical outcome. One of them will eventually have to eliminate the other. Jane moves into the kitchen, leaving John sitting alone at the table. His nerves tighten as he slowly picks up a dinner knife. For a moment, he studies the blade, smiling faintly. Then he stands up, but instead of attacking, he casually announces that he will cut the steak himself. Jane responds instantly. From beneath her clothing, she pulls out another knife. The tension between them spikes. For several seconds, neither of them moves. Finally, both quietly place their knives down. Conversation resumes as if nothing unusual happened. They begin discussing work. Jane casually mentions that someone has recently been stealing contracts from her company. John listens carefully. The culprit she describes sounds suspiciously familiar. John pours another glass of wine for her, filling it generously. With an exaggerated flourish, he sets the bottle down. Jane senses something isn't right. Suddenly, she releases the glass. Red wine spills across the carpet. Both of them immediately grab towels and rush out of the dining room, pretending to clean the mess. But the situation is obvious now. Neither of them is normal. John claims he's going to fetch more towels, but instead he slips away and retrieves a hidden handgun. Jane doesn't wait around. She's already racing away from the house in her car. John jumps into his own vehicle and chases after her. Despite everything, the situation is painfully complicated. They may now be enemies, but they are also a married couple who have loved each other for 6 years. Killing each other won't be easy. During the pursuit, John nervously squeezes the trigger of his gun by accident. The bullet strikes Jane's windshield. Any chance of calmly explaining the situation is now gone. Jane swerves her car toward him, attempting to confront him directly, but the moment for conversation has already passed. John jumps out of his vehicle while Jane leaps away in the opposite direction. After the chaos, both seek advice from the people they trust most. John visits an old friend, a man who has always believed that trusting women leads only to trouble. Jane turns to one of her colleagues, who bluntly reminds her that hesitation is dangerous in their profession. If her husband truly stands in the way of the mission, she should eliminate him. That night, neither of them can sleep. John lies awake in his friend's spare bed, staring at the ceiling. Jane spends the night wrestling with the same torment. The following morning, Jane returns home with several members of her team. They begin thoroughly searching the house, dismantling everything that might reveal information about John. As she watches a colleague rip apart one of her childhood dolls, conflicting emotions wash over her. She pauses when she sees their wedding photos. For a moment, memories flood back. Then she turns away. Meanwhile, John decides not to go home right away. Instead, he invites the curious neighbor who has always wanted to see his garage. The man has no idea he's being used as a temporary shield. Once inside, John slips away into his secret basement, but when he opens the door, he freezes. Every weapon, every piece of ammunition, every hidden asset he owned is gone. Jane has already cleared the place out. The war between husband and wife has officially begun. Jane orders her subordinates to investigate John's entire background, but before they can finish the task, something unexpected happens. John suddenly appears at the entrance of her company's building. Jane confronts him with a warning. "Be careful," she says calmly. "I could eliminate you anytime, anywhere, and you'd never even see me coming." Before the conversation can escalate, alarms suddenly sound. Intruders have reached the rooftop. Jane immediately orders an evacuation. Inside the building, the female agents begin destroying everything. blowing up files, wiping computer systems, and erasing hard drives to prevent any information from being captured. Windows shatter one after another as explosive charges detonate. From the rooftop, several grappling spears shoot across toward a neighboring building. One by one, the agents zipline across the gap to escape. Meanwhile, John infiltrates the facility through a hidden passageway. He moves quickly through the corridors, heading straight toward Jane's private office. But when he finally reaches the room, she's already gone. Jane has reached the rooftop of the opposite building. For a brief moment, John has a perfect opportunity to take the shot. But he doesn't. He lowers the weapon, because despite everything that has happened, he still can't bring himself to kill his wife. After the failed rooftop encounter, John wastes no time investigating further. By combing through the wreckage of the previous operation and following a trail of clues, he eventually identifies a real estate company that he suspects Jane is secretly using as a cover for her office. Determined to confront her, John enters the building and steps into the elevator. The doors close. Moments later, something feels wrong. The elevator suddenly jerks to a halt. John immediately understands what's happening. Jane has anticipated his arrival. 70 floors above the ground, the elevator now hangs motionless in the shaft. Jane has him trapped. Through the building's communication system, she begins speaking to him, calmly explaining that he still has a chance to walk away. If he leaves now, she won't have to go any further. But John refuses to show fear. With complete confidence, he responds, "Do you even realize what I'm capable of?" Jane hesitates, giving him one final warning. If he doesn't leave, she will detonate the explosive planted in the elevator. Before the conversation can continue, one of her subordinates presses the detonator. The screen monitoring the elevator flickers. Then the explosion erupts. The blast tears through the elevator car, sending it plunging downward. On the surveillance feed, the image fades to black and white before cutting out completely. The elevator crashes violently to the ground floor and explodes again on impact. Believing the matter settled, Jane rushes out of the building. After 6 years of marriage, she assumes her husband is gone forever, but John is far from dead. Moments earlier, sensing the trap, he had cleverly disabled the security cameras inside the elevator and slipped into another one nearby. Now he watches everything unfold from a safe distance. Even so, the situation leaves a bitter feeling in his chest. If Jane truly intended to kill him, then their relationship may have been nothing more than an illusion. Meanwhile, Jane is struggling with her own emotions. Later that night, she visits the restaurant where John once proposed to her. Sitting alone at the same table, she stares into her glass as tears silently roll down her face. Then a man approaches and gently pours her a drink. Without even looking up, she knows exactly who it is. John. But this meeting isn't about romance. It's about ending their marriage. They begin talking honestly for the first time in years. Each of them explains their side of the story, but neither can find a solution to the situation they're trapped in. Their lives as assassins have placed them on opposite sides of a deadly conflict. After a while, John asks Jane to dance. As they move across the floor together, their conversation shifts between memories, resentment, and unresolved feelings. During the dance, John discreetly removes the hidden weapon Jane had been carrying, but Jane isn't fooled. As she kneels briefly during the dance movement, John flashes a sly grin until he realizes Jane has just disarmed him as well. Even now, they're still trying to outmaneuver each other. They talk about marriage, deception, and the secrets they kept from one another. Then Jane casually mentions she needs to use the restroom. John immediately knows that nothing about this evening will be that simple. Moments later, Jane bursts out of the women's restroom just before it explodes behind her. The blast throws the entire restaurant into chaos. Guests panic and scatter in every direction. Using the confusion as cover, Jane slips out of the building. John rushes after her. Outside, an elderly man who admires John stops him briefly and asks an odd question. "Did you happen to take a clock with you when you left?" The comment makes John pause. Suddenly, he realizes something terrifying. Jane has planted a timed explosive inside his clothing. If there's one thing he has learned tonight, it's that Jane can be just as ruthless as he is. John quickly steals a nearby car and drives away while calling Jane on the phone. This is the second time she has nearly killed him. But as he prepares himself mentally for the possibility that he might have to end things permanently, memories begin flooding back. He remembers the moment they first met. To him, Jane had felt like Christmas morning, unexpected, exciting, and impossible to forget. Jane feels the same heartbreak on the other end of the call. She quietly admits that John was the most handsome target she had ever encountered. Neither of them truly wants to destroy the other. Eventually, they decide there is only one way to resolve the situation. They will return home and settle everything there. John arrives at the house first, pulling into the driveway. Seconds later, Jane slams her car directly into his vehicle. She rushes toward the garage while John jumps out and sprints across the lawn toward the mansion. Jane reaches the garage first and prepares for the inevitable confrontation. John enters the house and moves carefully up to the third floor. There he finds several decorative toy guns displayed as ornaments, except they aren't toys at all. They are fully functional firearms. John attaches a silencer and begins moving quietly through the house. Meanwhile, Jane unleashes a barrage of gunfire up the staircase, spraying bullets without hesitation. The couple's home suddenly becomes a battlefield. A fierce firefight erupts along the staircase. John reloads smoothly with practiced skill while Jane charges downward, firing as she moves. Miraculously, the bullets keep missing their targets. Jane now holds a gun in each hand, looking fierce and unstoppable as she advances. Their fight spreads through the house. The kitchen is destroyed. The refrigerator shatters. Furniture splinters under the hail of bullets. The home that once symbolized their marriage is torn apart by violence. At one point, Jane cleverly shoots a gas cylinder that John had dismantled earlier. The impact ignites the kitchen in flames. With the house burning around them, their fight becomes more physical. They crash into each other, throwing punches and kicks with brutal force. John hurls Jane across the room. Jane grabs a heavy iron pan and swings it at him without hesitation. The struggle becomes increasingly intense. Jane lands several hard punches. John grabs her by the hair and retaliates with powerful kicks. Neither of them shows mercy. Finally, both manage to grab their guns at the same moment. They point the weapons directly at each other, and then neither of them pulls the trigger. John lowers his gun first. He simply cannot do it. Jane feels the same. The anger fades, replaced by something much stronger. Instead of continuing the fight, they collapse into each other, rediscovering the love that brought them together in the first place. Their employers had given them 48 hours to eliminate the assassin from the rival organization, but neither John nor Jane can complete the mission. In fact, strangely enough, their relationship feels stronger now than it has in years. The next morning they sit together in their half-destroyed home. They drink juice from a cracked glass and eat breakfast on the only clean surface left in the house. For the first time in a long time, they are completely honest with each other. But their decision not to kill each other creates a new problem. Their bosses are not pleased. Since both assassins have failed to eliminate their assigned targets, the organizations come to a brutal conclusion. If neither John nor Jane will complete the job, then both of them must die. Suddenly, a smoke grenade crashes through the window and fills the room with thick smoke. Realizing they are under attack, John grabs Jane's hand. Together, they retreat quickly toward the basement. Realizing neither of them could bring themselves to kill the other, John and Jane finally make a decision. Instead of fighting each other, they will face the real enemy together. The danger outside their home is immediate. Through the thick smoke filling the house, a small robotic device rolls into the room. Its purpose is obvious, an explosive meant to destroy the entire villa and eliminate both of them at once. The countdown leaves them almost no time. John grabs Jane and pulls her toward the exit. They barely escape before the device detonates. A massive explosion tears through the house. Flames swallow the building, and several of the attackers caught too close are consumed by the blast. In the chaos, no one even knows whose explosive actually caused the destruction, and some of the enemy agents end up dying alongside their own allies. John and Jane manage to crawl out from beneath the debris, covered in dust. They turn back to look at what used to be their home. The house where they spent 6 years together is now nothing more than burning rubble. For a moment they stand there silently, both feeling the weight of what they've lost. But there's no time to dwell on it. They know exactly who is responsible. It's time to turn against the organizations that betrayed them. They quickly borrow a car from their neighbor and speed away. On the road, they briefly run into a familiar acquaintance before continuing their escape. John checks his weapon and loads a fresh magazine. Soon they notice 3 cars trailing them closely. The hunt has begun again. Jane climbs into the back seat and opens the trunk to grab additional weapons. The vehicle shakes violently as John pushes the car to its limits, forcing them to switch positions so Jane can drive more effectively. The transition actually makes them work together more smoothly. One of the pursuing vehicles turns out to have bulletproof windows, making it difficult to stop. During the tense chase, John casually mentions that he had once been married before. Jane slams on the brakes instantly. That is information she clearly did not know, and she's not pleased about it. Meanwhile, one of the attackers climbs halfway out of a car's sunroof to shoot at them. John grabs a golf club, pulls the pin on a grenade, and tells Jane to accelerate. With perfect timing, the explosion destroys the pursuing vehicle. Another assassin foolishly challenges John directly, expecting an honorable fight. The result is quick and brutal. The man enters through one side of the confrontation and exits through the other, defeated almost instantly. As the chase continues, Jane shares a personal secret. She tells John that her parents actually died when she was only 5 years old. The people who appeared at their wedding pretending to be her parents were simply actors she had hired. Two more enemy vehicles continue pursuing them. Jane suddenly jerks the steering wheel sharply, causing their van to drift sideways and spin around. In the same motion, she raises her handgun and fires several precise shots. Within seconds, the second and third cars are disabled. Two more enemy vehicles eliminated. John realizes he has been seriously underestimating his wife. With the immediate danger gone, the tension fades slightly and they continue talking. John admits that the parents who attended their wedding were actually his real parents. Later, John meets briefly with his longtime friend. The friend had assumed John had already eliminated Jane, but seeing them together, clearly still close, comes as a surprise. The friend offers a suggestion. Both assassination organizations are hunting them now. The smartest move might be for the couple to split up and run in different directions. It wouldn't guarantee survival, but it might improve their chances. Even if those chances are small, Jane also contacts one of her trusted colleagues. After discussing the situation, John and Jane decide the best way to understand what's happening is to track down their shared target, Benjamin Dance. Dance is now under extremely tight security. Working together, the couple begins their infiltration. John moves through a system of underground pipes while Jane guides him from outside, coordinating their approach. The operation goes surprisingly smoothly. After quietly eliminating the guards, they manage to abduct Benjamin Dance without much resistance. They take him to a rented room and begin interrogating him. Both of them want answers. Why did both of their companies order Dance's assassination? John attempts to question the prisoner, but his interrogation skills seem somewhat lacking. Jane, on the other hand, takes a far more direct approach. Her methods are aggressive and uncompromising. Eventually, they discover that Dance was carrying a letter. The contents reveal a shocking truth. Benjamin Dance was never the real target. He was bait. Both organizations already knew that John and Jane were secretly married. From their perspective, having two elite assassins from rival companies forming a family represented a dangerous conflict of interest. So the companies devised a plan. Each assassin would be assigned the same target. The expectation was simple. During the mission, one would kill the other. But when neither of them completed the job, the organizations decided on a different solution. Now both John and Jane must die. John removes Dance's belt and checks the time. They realize enemy forces are already closing in. Within 2 minutes, helicopters appear overhead, while heavily armed squads arrive in luxury off-road vehicles. Dozens of agents storm the hotel where the interrogation took place. But when they enter the room, they only find Benjamin Dance tied up. John and Jane are gone. The attackers assume the couple has fled. What they don't realize is that John and Jane are hiding in the most dangerous place possible. Nearby, Jane suggests they should separate. Splitting up might improve their chances of survival. John disagrees. Running would mean spending the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. Instead, he believes they should face the problem together and end the threat once and for all. Jane thinks about it carefully. Then she agrees. They move into a nearby shopping mall to prepare for the coming confrontation, but enemy surveillance drones quickly spot them. Knowing they've been discovered, John and Jane begin gearing up. Their pursuers arrive soon after. The mall becomes the stage for a massive battle. Both of them change into tactical gear and equip night vision goggles. Enemy operatives quietly move through the building, trying to approach without drawing attention. Silence becomes part of the battlefield. As one group of enemies approaches, Jane spins a handful of throwing knives. Almost every blade hits its target. A few miss intentionally. Then the gunfire begins. They rush into an elevator to reposition, preparing for the next phase of the fight. But the next floor proves even more dangerous. Jane briefly apologizes for the earlier knife incident, but John isn't interested in talking right now. They step out of the elevator. John charges forward while Jane takes a high vantage point to provide sniper support, but enemy agents soon locate her position. Seeing bullets flying toward Jane makes John furious. He refuses to allow anyone to threaten his wife. Together they ready their weapons and burst through a door, charging directly into the final battle. Standing back to back, they move like a perfectly synchronized team. Grenades explode around them. Bullets fly past them by inches, yet one enemy after another falls. At that moment, the attackers seem less like individual opponents and more like all the challenges life has thrown at them. Through trust, skill, and teamwork, John and Jane overcome everything. When the battle finally ends, only the two of them remain standing, victorious. Some time later, they rebuild their home. The destruction of their old life has strangely brought them closer together. With the secrets gone and the danger behind them, the passion they once lost returns. And this time, they truly live happily ever after. Analysis: have you ever imagined what would happen if the person you married was secretly living a completely different life? Not just a small secret, not a hidden past, but an entire second identity. Now imagine discovering that your husband or your wife is actually a professional assassin. And here's the real twist: you are one too. This is the explosive idea behind the film Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a movie that takes the ordinary struggles of marriage and turns them into something wildly unexpected. At first glance, John and Jane Smith look like any other couple living a quiet suburban life. They attend marriage counseling, complain about routine problems, and struggle with the boredom that slowly creeps into many long relationships. But beneath that ordinary surface lies something far more dangerous. Both of them are highly trained killers working for rival organizations, and neither of them knows the truth about the other. For years, they've shared a home, a bed, and a life built entirely on lies, until one mission changes everything. When their secret worlds finally collide, their marriage doesn't just face problems, it turns into a full-scale war. Bullets start flying, their house becomes a battlefield, and suddenly the biggest question isn't whether their marriage will survive, it's whether they will survive each other. What makes this movie so fascinating isn't just the action or the explosions. It's the way it mixes intense spy thriller energy with sharp humor and relationship drama. Because underneath all the gunfights and chaos, this story asks a very strange but interesting question. What happens when the person who knows you best is also the one hired to kill you? And as the story unfolds, you'll see how a marriage built on secrets, lies, and hidden identities slowly transforms into something completely different, something far more explosive than either of them expected. So in this breakdown, we're going to explore the story, the hidden details, the ending, and everything that makes Mr. and Mrs. Smith such a unique and entertaining film. And trust me, this marriage is about to get very dangerous. Before diving deeper into the chaos of this explosive marriage, let's take a quick look at the movie itself. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was released in 2005 and directed by Doug Liman, a filmmaker known for creating fast-paced, stylish action movies that blend intensity with character-driven storytelling. The film stars Brad Pitt as John Smith and Angelina Jolie as Jane Smith. At first glance, their characters appear to be a completely ordinary married couple. They live in a beautiful suburban house. They go grocery shopping together. They attend marriage counseling, and like many couples, they seem to be struggling with the routine of married life. Their conversations feel forced. Their relationship feels distant. And the excitement that once existed between them appears to have completely faded. But there's something very unusual about this marriage. John Smith isn't actually a construction contractor like he claims to be. And Jane Smith definitely isn't working a normal office job. Both of them are elite professional assassins, secretly working for two completely different organizations. They travel the world completing dangerous missions, eliminating high-value targets, and living double lives that their spouse knows nothing about. For years, their secret careers somehow remain hidden from each other. Until one assignment changes everything. During a routine mission, both John and Jane are unexpectedly sent after the same target, and when they cross paths during the operation, something shocking becomes clear. The person standing in front of them, the person they've been married to for years, is also a highly trained assassin. And the moment that truth comes out, their entire relationship begins to collapse. Because in the world they work in, secrets are dangerous. And once those secrets are exposed, someone usually ends up with a target on their back. Suddenly, the quiet suburban couple is pulled into a deadly situation where trust disappears, weapons come out, and their marriage turns into something far more dangerous than either of them ever imagined. What starts as a story about a struggling relationship quickly transforms into a high-energy mix of action, humor, and explosive confrontations. And this is exactly where the real story begins. At first glance, Mr. and Mrs. Smith might look like a typical spy thriller: guns, car chases, explosions, and assassins operating in the shadows. But the moment you start watching, you realize this movie is doing something very different. It isn't just an action film, and it isn't just a romantic comedy either. Instead, it's a clever mix of three powerful genres working together at the same time. First, there's the action thriller side of the story. Both John and Jane are elite assassins. Their world is filled with dangerous missions, high-tech weapons, and deadly organizations operating behind the scenes. Every time they step into action mode, the film delivers intense shootouts, stylish fight scenes, and explosive confrontations that keep the tension high. But right alongside that action is something unexpected: relationship drama. Underneath the bullets and explosions, this story is actually about a marriage that has slowly fallen apart. John and Jane aren't just dealing with secret identities, they're also dealing with boredom, miscommunication, and emotional distance. Their biggest problem isn't just their jobs. It's the fact that they don't really know each other anymore. And that's where the third genre comes in: romantic comedy. Yes, even in the middle of gunfights and destruction, the film constantly injects humor into the story. Their arguments feel strangely familiar, like the kind of disagreements many couples have, except instead of yelling across the kitchen table, they're firing rockets across the living room. The result is a movie where the action isn't just about survival, it's about revealing the truth, because the core themes of this story revolve around three powerful ideas. The first is secrecy and identity. For years, John and Jane have built their entire relationship on carefully maintained lies. They pretend to be ordinary people while hiding their true selves. The second theme is trust. Once their secrets are exposed, the real challenge isn't defeating enemies, it's deciding whether they can trust each other again. And the third theme is something surprisingly relatable: reigniting passion. Ironically, the moment their marriage becomes the most dangerous is also the moment it becomes the most exciting. The fights, the chaos, the confrontation, everything forces them to finally drop their masks and see each other for who they really are. And in a strange way, the violence between them becomes the very thing that starts bringing them back together. Because sometimes, the biggest battles in a relationship aren't fought with words. Sometimes, they're fought with everything you've got. The story of Mr. and Mrs. Smith begins in a way that feels surprisingly normal. We see John and Jane Smith sitting in marriage counseling, calmly explaining to their therapist that their relationship has become boring. They've been married for several years. They live in a comfortable suburban house. Their life looks stable from the outside, but something is clearly missing. Their conversations feel mechanical. Their daily routine feels predictable. And both of them quietly admit that the excitement in their marriage has completely faded. At this point, nothing about them seems unusual, except one small detail: everything they've said about their lives is a lie. John Smith appears to be a relaxed, easygoing contractor who spends his days working construction jobs. In reality, he is a highly skilled professional assassin, carrying out dangerous missions for a secret organization that operates in the shadows. Jane Smith, on the other hand, presents herself as a sophisticated executive working a normal office job, but behind that calm personality is another deadly secret. She is also an elite assassin, working for an entirely different agency. For years, both of them have lived double lives. They leave the house pretending to go to work, then travel across the world eliminating targets, completing covert missions, and returning home as if nothing happened. And somehow, through careful lies and perfect timing, they've managed to keep their secret identities hidden from each other, until one mission changes everything. Both of their agencies assign them to capture or eliminate a mysterious target. Neither of them knows the other has been sent on the same mission, but when the operation begins, they suddenly find themselves standing in the same place, pointing weapons at the same person, and in that moment, the truth begins to unfold. The person John has been married to for years is not who he thought she was, and the man Jane has shared her life with is hiding exactly the same secret. Both of them realize the shocking reality at the same time. They didn't just marry someone with secrets, they married someone exactly like themselves. But in the world of professional assassins, secrets like this are dangerous. Once their agencies discover the mistake, the situation becomes even worse. Now both organizations see them as a risk, and the solution is brutally simple. John receives a new mission. Jane receives the exact same one: eliminate your spouse. What follows is one of the most explosive relationship conflicts ever put on screen. Their peaceful suburban home suddenly turns into a battlefield. Hidden weapons are revealed, walls get destroyed. And the couple that once struggled with boredom now finds themselves locked in a full-scale war. But as the chaos unfolds, something unexpected starts happening. Instead of completely destroying their relationship, the fight begins forcing them to finally tell the truth. And strangely, that honesty might be the only thing that can save them. Because sometimes the fastest way to fix a broken marriage is to survive trying to kill each other first. As the story of Mr. and Mrs. Smith reaches its final act, the situation between John and Jane completely changes. At the beginning of the conflict, they were enemies. Each of them had been ordered to eliminate the other. Their house had turned into a battlefield. Their trust had completely collapsed, and both of them believed that the only way to survive was to take the other one down first. But something unexpected happens during their brutal fight. For the first time in their entire marriage, they start being honest. No lies, no fake identities, no carefully constructed stories about their jobs, just the truth. and that honesty slowly changes everything. Instead of seeing each other as enemies, they begin to realize something far more important. They are actually the only two people in the world who truly understand each other. Both of them live the same dangerous life. Both of them carry the same secrets, and both of them have spent years pretending to be someone else. But while John and Jane are finally beginning to reconnect, the organizations they work for have already made another decision. From the perspective of their agencies, the Smiths are now a major liability, two elite assassins who know too much and who might turn against their employers. So the solution is simple: eliminate both of them. Suddenly, waves of professional killers begin hunting the couple down. What started as a fight between husband and wife quickly becomes something very different. Now they have a common enemy. And for the first time in the movie, John and Jane stop fighting each other and start fighting together. The final battle is chaotic, intense, and surprisingly satisfying. Dozens of assassins surround them. Gunfire fills the air. And the couple that once tried to destroy each other now moves perfectly in sync. Every movement is coordinated. Every attack is calculated. They fight like two people who finally understand exactly who their partner really is. And that's the real meaning behind the ending. Their marriage doesn't survive because they fix their problems peacefully. It survives because they finally stop hiding from each other. Once the lies disappear, the relationship actually becomes stronger. The film ends where the story originally began, in marriage counseling. But this time, something feels different. Their relationship no longer feels dull or disconnected. Now they know exactly who they're married to. And strangely enough, that dangerous truth might be the very thing that finally makes their marriage work. Because sometimes the strongest relationships aren't the peaceful ones. Sometimes they're the ones that survive complete chaos and come out stronger on the other side. One of the reasons Mr. and Mrs. Smith remain so entertaining even after multiple viewings is the number of subtle details hidden throughout the film. On the surface, it looks like a straightforward action movie, but if you pay close attention, you'll notice that the story quietly reveals clues long before the big twist arrives. One of the first hidden details appears in the behavior of John and Jane themselves. In the early scenes, before we know their secret, their reactions to everyday situations feel slightly unusual. Their body language is controlled, their awareness of their surroundings is unusually sharp, and their reflexes are almost too quick for ordinary people. These small moments subtly hint that both of them are trained professionals long before the audience learns the truth. Another powerful symbol appears in the destruction of their house. Their home represents the perfect suburban life they've been pretending to live: neat, organized, and completely ordinary. But when their fight begins, the house quickly turns into a battlefield. Walls collapse, furniture explodes, entire rooms are destroyed. This isn't just an action sequence, it's a visual metaphor for their relationship. Every lie they've told, every secret they've hidden, and every fake identity they've created begins to fall apart along with the house itself. By the time the fight ends, the illusion of their perfect life has been completely shattered. And strangely enough, that destruction is what finally allows them to start being honest with each other. Another clever storytelling detail appears in the therapy scenes that open and close the film. At the beginning, their counseling session feels awkward and distant. Both of them speak carefully, almost like they're hiding something, which of course they are. But when we return to therapy at the end of the film, their tone is completely different. Now they speak openly, confidently, and even with a hint of excitement. It's a small detail, but it quietly shows how much their relationship has changed. The biggest transformation didn't happen during the gunfights. It happened when they finally stopped pretending. And that's what makes these hidden details so interesting. Because beneath all the explosions and action scenes, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is actually telling a much deeper story about honesty, identity, and what happens when two people finally reveal who they truly are. Sometimes the most important clues in a movie aren't the loud ones. They're the quiet details hiding in plain sight. Behind the stylish gunfights and explosive action of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, there's an entire story that happened off-screen, and some of these behind-the-scenes facts are just as interesting as the movie itself. First, let's talk about the casting. The film stars Brad Pitt as John Smith and Angelina Jolie as Jane Smith. Their chemistry on screen is one of the biggest reasons the movie works so well. Every scene between them feels intense, playful, and unpredictable. Their arguments feel real, their action scenes feel energetic, and the tension between them carries the entire film. But what made this even more fascinating was what happened during the production of the movie. During filming, rumors began circulating that Pitt and Jolie had developed a strong connection while working together. Those rumors quickly became global headlines and turned the movie into one of the most talked about productions in Hollywood at the time. Whether audiences came for the action or the curiosity around the actors, the attention surrounding the film helped make it a massive cultural moment. But the actors didn't just rely on chemistry to make the movie work. Both Pitt and Jolie went through intense training before filming began. They trained with professional stunt teams and weapons experts to make the fight scenes look believable. This included learning tactical movement, gun handling, and combat choreography. The result was action scenes that feel fast, precise, and incredibly stylish. Another impressive part of the production was the house battle sequence, which is one of the most memorable moments in the entire movie. The scene where John and Jane destroy their own home while trying to eliminate each other required weeks of planning. The stunt team had to choreograph explosions, collapsing walls, and fight movements so that everything looked chaotic while still remaining safe for the actors. Dozens of stunt performers, special effects technicians, and camera operators worked together to make the sequence feel both wild and controlled at the same time. Director Doug Liman also encouraged improvisation during several scenes. Instead of forcing every line of dialogue to follow a strict script, he allowed the actors to experiment with their performances. This helped create the natural, playful tone that makes many of the couple's arguments feel authentic. And in many ways, that authenticity is what makes the film memorable. Because even though the movie is full of explosions, secret missions, and deadly assassins, at its core, the story still feels like a very unusual and very entertaining marriage story. When people think about stylish spy movies filled with action and humor, Mr. and Mrs. Smith often stands out as one of the most unique entries in the genre, but it didn't exist in isolation. Over the years, several films have explored the idea of mixing espionage with romance, creating stories where love and danger collide in unexpected ways. One of the closest comparisons is True Lies. In that film, Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a secret agent whose wife has no idea about his dangerous double life. The story also blends intense action with relationship drama, revealing how secrets can slowly damage a marriage. But the key difference is that in True Lies, only one partner lives the secret life. In Mr. and Mrs. Smith, both partners are hiding the exact same truth, and that twist completely changes the dynamic. Another comparison often made is with Night and Day, starring Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. That movie also mixes action with romantic tension, placing an ordinary character into the chaotic world of spies and international conspiracies. However, Night and Day focuses more on adventure and high-speed action, while Mr. and Mrs. Smith keeps the story centered around the relationship itself. Another interesting comparison is This Means War, where two CIA agents unknowingly fall in love with the same woman and end up competing against each other. Again, the film uses espionage as the backdrop for romantic conflict. But unlike those stories, Mr. and Mrs. Smith pushes the concept much further. Instead of rivalry between friends, instead of one person hiding the truth, it creates a situation where two people who love each other are literally ordered to kill each other. And that's what makes the movie so memorable. The action scenes are fun, the humor is sharp, but the real strength of the film is how it uses the spy genre as a metaphor for relationships. Because at its core, the story isn't just about assassins. It's about two people who have spent years pretending to be someone else, finally confronting the truth about each other. And that unusual mix of romance, danger, and explosive action is exactly what helped Mr. and Mrs. Smith stand out from so many other spy movies. When Mr. and Mrs. Smith hit theaters in 2005, it didn't take long for it to become one of the most talked-about movies of the year. Audiences were immediately drawn to the film's explosive concept, a married couple secretly working as rival assassins who suddenly find themselves ordered to kill each other. It was a premise that felt fresh, entertaining, and just unpredictable enough to keep viewers hooked from beginning to end. And the response at the box office proved it. The movie went on to earn over $480 million worldwide, making it one of the biggest action hits of its time. Viewers loved the fast pacing, the stylish action sequences, and most importantly, the incredible chemistry between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Their dynamic carried the entire film. Every argument felt electric. Every action scene felt playful, and their on-screen tension kept audiences glued to the story. Critics, however, had a slightly more mixed reaction. Many reviewers praised the film for its energy, humor, and star power. The action scenes were stylish, the concept was clever, and the performances were undeniably charismatic. But some critics felt the story itself was relatively simple and relied more on the chemistry between the leads than on deep storytelling. Even so, the movie continued to gain popularity over time. As the years passed, Mr. and Mrs. Smith developed a reputation as one of the most entertaining action comedies of the 2000s. It also remained part of pop culture conversation for another reason. The real-life attention surrounding Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie during the production of the film turned the movie into a global headline. Suddenly, the film wasn't just an action blockbuster, it was a cultural phenomenon people couldn't stop talking about. Because of that combination, a clever premise, explosive action, and unforgettable star chemistry, the film has remained relevant even years after its release. Today, many viewers still look back at Mr. and Mrs. Smith as one of those movies that perfectly captured the fun, stylish energy of mid-2000s action cinema. REVIWS. Imagine a movie that brings together two of the biggest stars in Hollywood, a director fresh off a modern spy classic, and a premise so outrageous it almost sells itself in a single sentence. A married couple, both secretly assassins. Both hired to kill each other. That's the promise of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And before the film even begins, expectations are already sky high. First, there's Doug Liman. Just a few years earlier, he had directed The Bourne Identity, a film that reshaped the modern spy thriller with fast pacing, grounded action, and a sharp sense of realism. That success created a simple assumption. If Liman could bring that same energy to another espionage story, audiences might be in for something special. But Mr. and Mrs. Smith wasn't just riding on the reputation of its director. It had something even more powerful. The film paired Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, two of the most recognizable and magnetic stars in the world. Individually, they were already icons whose presence alone could carry a film. Pitt had built a reputation for blending effortless charm with unpredictable intensity, while Jolie projected a kind of dangerous elegance that made her instantly compelling in action-driven roles. Together, they created an immediate sense of curiosity. Audiences weren't just watching characters, they were watching two enormous screen personalities bounce off each other. That kind of pairing naturally generates anticipation because viewers expect sparks, tension, and a sense of playful rivalry the moment those actors share the frame. Their casting instantly turned the film into an event. This wasn't just another action movie, it became a spectacle built around the idea of watching two glamorous, charismatic stars collide on screen. The marketing leaned heavily into that chemistry. Posters, trailers, interviews, everything highlighted the electric pairing at the center of the film. The message was clear. This movie wasn't just about espionage. It was about two stars sharing the screen and setting it on fire. The promotional campaign carefully framed the film as both sleek and playful, emphasizing style, flirtation, and danger in equal measure. Every image suggested a blend of elegance and chaos. Perfectly dressed spies pointing guns at each other, while standing in what looks like a perfectly curated domestic life. Even before audiences stepped into the theater, the film had already positioned itself as something glamorous and larger than life. And then there's the premise itself. At first glance, it sounds almost too perfect for Hollywood. A married suburban couple slowly realizing that the person they share a bed with is actually their professional enemy. He's an assassin. She's an assassin, and their latest assignment, each other. That concept blends multiple genres at once: romantic comedy, spy thriller, marital satire, and high-octane action. It promises humor, tension, and explosive conflict wrapped around a relationship story. It's the kind of idea that instantly makes audiences curious because it turns something familiar, marriage, into a battlefield filled with secrets and deception. The concept invites viewers to imagine everyday domestic frustrations taken to absurd extremes, where arguments don't just end with slammed doors, but with gunfire and destruction. With that combination, a proven action director, a wildly entertaining premise, and two of Hollywood's biggest stars, the expectations were enormous. Everything about Mr. and Mrs. Smith suggested it could be something unique. A stylish spy movie with real personality and a clever twist on marriage. On paper, it had all the ingredients for a film that could balance spectacle with humor, blending explosive action sequences with sharp character dynamics. The idea hinted at a story where emotional tension and physical conflict would mirror each other, where the chaos of espionage becomes a metaphor for the hidden frustrations inside long-term relationships. But that raises the real question. Did the film live up to that promise, or was the excitement surrounding it bigger than the movie itself? Because sometimes Hollywood produces films that sound irresistible in concept, but struggle when it comes to execution. A clever idea can generate massive anticipation, but sustaining that energy across an entire narrative requires careful balance between story, tone, and character chemistry. To answer that, we have to start where the story begins, with a seemingly perfect suburban marriage hiding a very dangerous secret. On the surface, John and Jane Smith have the perfect life, a beautiful suburban house, great jobs. Nice cars, a comfortable routine. They look like the definition of the American dream. Their home feels meticulously curated, the kind of environment designed to project stability and success. From the outside, their life appears calm and orderly, almost like something pulled from a lifestyle magazine. Everything about their routine suggests normalcy, the quiet predictability of a couple that has settled comfortably into married life. But there's just one small problem. Everything about their lives is a lie. When we first meet the couple, their marriage is already struggling. They sit in a quiet therapist's office, trying to explain what's wrong with their relationship. They talk about routine, about distance, about the feeling that something important is missing. It feels like a very ordinary marital problem. The conversation has an awkward honesty to it, the kind of hesitant discussion that happens when two people can sense their relationship drifting but don't quite know how to articulate why. There's an emotional stiffness between them, as if both are carefully choosing their words while avoiding something deeper. But what neither of them says out loud is that they're both hiding the biggest secret imaginable. John isn't actually a construction contractor, and Jane definitely isn't a technology consultant. Both of them are highly trained professional assassins. They work for completely different organizations. They carry out deadly missions around the world, and somehow, after years of marriage, they have no idea what the other person really does. This revelation instantly reframes everything about their relationship. The polite conversations, the small frustrations, the emotional distance, it all begins to look different once the audience realizes how much of their lives is built on carefully maintained deception. It's a relationship built on absolute secrecy. For years, their double lives never collide. Each of them leaves the house every day pretending to live a normal professional life, while secretly operating in a dangerous world filled with weapons, covert operations, and high-stakes missions. The remarkable part isn't just that they're both spies, it's that they've managed to maintain this illusion for so long without ever discovering the truth about each other. Their marriage becomes a strange balancing act between intimacy and concealment, where trust exists on the surface while massive lies remain buried underneath, until one mission changes everything. Both John and Jane receive the exact same assignment: track down and eliminate a mysterious target. Neither of them realizes the other has been given the same job. The situation immediately creates a ticking clock of tension because the audience understands something the characters don't yet see. Two professionals who pride themselves on precision and secrecy are unknowingly walking into the same operation from opposite sides. And when they finally meet at the mission location, the truth begins to unravel. Suddenly, the impossible becomes clear. The person standing across from them, the person they've lived with, eaten dinner with, slept beside for years, is actually a rival assassin. In a single moment, their entire marriage collapses. Every conversation, every memory, every moment together. It was all happening while both of them were living completely separate secret lives. The shock isn't just professional, it's deeply personal. The discovery forces them to reevaluate every aspect of their relationship, realizing that the person they thought they knew best has been hiding an identity just as dangerous and complex as their own. And things get worse, because once their identities are exposed, the rules of their profession kick in. Both of their agencies issue the same order: eliminate the threat, which means John has to kill Jane, and Jane has to kill John. In the cold logic of the spy world, loyalty to the mission overrides everything else. Marriage, history, shared memories, all of it becomes irrelevant once they are labeled as liabilities. The system that trained them now demands that they treat the person closest to them as a target. What follows is one of the most bizarre and explosive relationship conflicts ever put on screen. A married couple trying to assassinate each other, gunfights in their own home, knife fights in the kitchen, explosions tearing apart the life they built together. The domestic space that once symbolized stability suddenly transforms into a battlefield. Every room becomes a stage for confrontation, turning everyday household objects into tools of survival. And as the violence escalates, the film leans fully into the absurdity of its central idea: marriage counseling taken to its most extreme and destructive form, where the breakdown of communication doesn't just lead to arguments, but to total annihilation. But as the battle escalates, something unexpected happens. In the middle of all the chaos, they begin to realize they might still love each other. And once that realization hits, the story stops being about two assassins hunting each other. It becomes something even more dangerous: a married couple taking on the entire world together. That shift is crucial because it changes the emotional center of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. What initially looks like a conflict built purely on betrayal slowly reveals itself as something far more complicated. Beneath the bullets and broken furniture, the film starts exploring a strange idea: that the very chaos tearing their lives apart might also be the thing forcing them to reconnect. At its core, Mr. and Mrs. Smith isn't really about spies. It's about marriage, but not the romantic fairy tale kind. This is a marriage built on secrets, lies, frustration, and eventually bullets. The film uses espionage as a metaphor, exaggerating the hidden tensions that often exist in long-term relationships. Instead of quiet resentment or emotional distance, those tensions manifest in explosive confrontations. The spy genre becomes a storytelling device that magnifies the emotional stakes of a relationship that has been quietly deteriorating for years. When we first see John and Jane Smith together, they look like the ideal suburban couple. Beautiful house, nice neighborhood, successful careers. From the outside, everything seems perfect, but behind closed doors, their relationship is already falling apart. They barely communicate, they hide their emotions. And the excitement that once defined their relationship has completely disappeared. Their daily interactions feel mechanical, like two people going through familiar motions without any real connection underneath. The routine of their lives has become so predictable that even their conversations sound rehearsed, stripped of any genuine curiosity about each other. That's why they're sitting in marriage counseling, trying to figure out what went wrong. But the truth is their problems run much deeper than ordinary marital boredom, because neither of them is who they claim to be. John is secretly a professional assassin. Jane is secretly a professional assassin. And for years, they've been living together while hiding their real lives from each other. The irony is almost absurd. Two people whose careers depend on deception have unknowingly built a relationship entirely defined by it. Think about that for a moment. They share the same bed, the same house, the same life, but their true identities remain completely hidden. Their marriage isn't just struggling, it's built on two massive lies. The film quietly suggests that secrecy has become the foundation of their relationship. Both of them are experts at compartmentalizing their lives, at presenting carefully constructed versions of themselves. In their professional world, that skill keeps them alive, but inside a marriage, that same habit slowly erodes trust and intimacy. When those secrets finally come out, everything collapses. Suddenly, every memory becomes questionable. Every moment of their relationship feels fake. Was the love real, or was it all just another disguise? The discovery forces both characters to reconsider the emotional history they share. Moments that once felt sincere are now clouded by doubt. If both partners were capable of hiding something so enormous, it becomes impossible to know which parts of their past were genuine and which were simply performances. For John and Jane, the revelation doesn't lead to a normal argument. It leads to war. Their home becomes a battlefield. Arguments turn into fistfights. Fistfights turn into gunfights. Furniture explodes. Walls collapse. The house itself becomes a symbol of their broken relationship. The destruction isn't just physical. It visually represents the collapse of the life they thought they had built together. Every shattered window and blasted wall reflects the emotional damage that had been quietly accumulating beneath their polished suburban image. And yet, something strange happens during all this destruction. For the first time in years, they start telling each other the truth. While trying to kill each other, they begin confessing things they had never shared before. John admits pieces of his past. Jane reveals details of her life before they met. The gunfight becomes something else entirely. It becomes the first honest conversation of their marriage. The absurdity of the situation strips away all the polite illusions they maintained for so long. With nothing left to hide, their words suddenly become direct and brutally honest. In a strange way, the violence forces them to finally face each other as they really are. Without the carefully constructed identities they used to maintain, both characters are exposed in a way they never allowed before. The conflict becomes strangely cathartic. Every attack, every shouted accusation, every emotional outburst reveals another piece of the truth they had been avoiding. It's as if the chaos breaks down the walls they built around themselves. And that's where the film flips its central idea. What begins as a story about a marriage falling apart slowly becomes a story about a marriage being rebuilt, not through romance, not through therapy, but through survival. Instead of rediscovering each other through quiet emotional reflection, they reconnect through shared danger. The adrenaline of conflict forces them to acknowledge the qualities they had once admired in each other: strength, intelligence, unpredictability. Because once John and Jane stop fighting each other, they realize the real enemy isn't inside the marriage. It's the world outside of it. The same organizations that once employed them now see them as liabilities. In the ruthless logic of their profession, two agents who know each other's secrets become too dangerous to keep alive. What began as a personal conflict quickly transforms into a much larger threat. And when the couple finally turns their weapons outward, their broken relationship transforms into something far more dangerous, a partnership. Instead of rivals, they become allies who understand each other's skills better than anyone else. The qualities that once made them deadly enemies suddenly make them the perfect team. Their shared experience, their identical training, and their mutual understanding of deception allow them to operate with an almost effortless coordination. If you try to watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith like a serious spy thriller, you're going to have a bad time, because this movie was never meant to be realistic. It's loud, it's absurd, and it fully embraces the chaos. The film doesn't attempt to ground its world in the same gritty realism that defines many modern espionage stories. Instead, it leans into exaggeration, turning every confrontation into a spectacle designed to entertain rather than convince. At its heart, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is pure popcorn entertainment. From the moment the story kicks into gear, the movie moves like a summer blockbuster. Gunfights erupt in suburban houses. High-speed chases tear through highways. Explosions happen where explosions probably shouldn't happen. The action keeps escalating, and the film rarely slows down long enough to question whether any of it makes sense. Momentum becomes the driving force, pushing the narrative forward with relentless energy, because the point isn't realism. The point is spectacle. The filmmakers understand that the audience isn't here for careful spy logistics or intricate political conspiracies. The appeal comes from watching two highly skilled characters unleash chaos while navigating the strange emotional terrain of their relationship. The scale of the action mirrors the scale of their personal conflict. But what makes the tone interesting is that the movie isn't just an action film. It's also a comedy, a very strange one. The humor comes from the ridiculousness of the situation itself. A married couple arguing over their relationship while trying to assassinate each other. The contrast between ordinary domestic complaints and extreme violence creates a constant sense of irony. Their house is being destroyed. Bullets are flying everywhere, and in the middle of all that chaos, they're casually trading sarcastic remarks about their marriage. It's domestic comedy with machine guns. The film plays these moments with a straight face, allowing the absurdity to speak for itself. The characters behave as if their lethal confrontation is just another argument, which makes the situation even funnier. There's also a strong dose of old-school screwball comedy in the film. Think of those classic romantic comedies where two characters constantly clash, insult each other, and flirt through conflict. Now imagine that same dynamic, but replace witty arguments with knife fights and car chases. The structure of their interactions still follows that familiar rhythm of attraction and irritation, only amplified by the life-or-death stakes surrounding them. John and Jane's relationship is built on that playful hostility. They tease, provoke, and challenge each other constantly. Their battles are intense, but they're also strangely flirtatious. Each confrontation becomes a twisted form of communication, where aggression and attraction blur together in unpredictable ways. The film also quietly pokes fun at two things at once. First, it satirizes marriage itself. Arguments turn into literal combat. Relationship problems are solved with weapons instead of words. Everyday frustrations become exaggerated into explosive showdowns, turning the emotional struggles of married life into an absurd action spectacle where domestic tension is treated like an international conflict waiting to erupt. Marriage counseling becomes the framing device for a story about two people destroying their own home. The idea itself is almost absurdly clever. Instead of opening with a traditional spy mission or a dramatic act of violence, the film begins with something far more mundane. A couple sitting awkwardly in therapy, trying to explain why their relationship feels empty. That setup quietly establishes the film's central joke. What looks like a familiar story about marital frustration slowly reveals itself to be something far more explosive. The calm environment of the therapist's office contrasts sharply with the chaos that unfolds later, turning ordinary relationship problems into a metaphorical war zone. But the movie is also poking fun at spy movie cliches. Secret agencies, over-the-top missions, endless waves of anonymous enemies. Everything is exaggerated to the point where it becomes almost cartoonish. The mysterious organizations that employ these assassins operate with the kind of vague authority often seen in espionage films, where shadowy bosses give orders without explanation and operatives are treated as disposable tools. The film leans into these tropes rather than trying to subvert them quietly. Instead, it pushes them further, making the entire world of espionage feel slightly exaggerated, almost like a playful parody of the genre itself. And beneath all that spectacle lies a layer of dark humor. People are constantly trying to kill each other. Entire groups of assassins appear just to get eliminated, and yet the film treats all of it with a strangely playful tone. Characters exchange sarcastic remarks in the middle of dangerous situations, and even the most destructive action scenes carry a sense of exaggerated theatricality. The violence becomes part of the film's comedic rhythm, where the absurdity of the situation often matters more than the consequences of the action. The violence is intense, but rarely taken seriously. It's chaos presented with a wink. The film seems fully aware that its premise is ridiculous, and instead of trying to justify it with heavy realism, it embraces the absurdity. That self-awareness gives the action a certain lightness. Even when the stakes appear deadly, the atmosphere remains playful, as if the movie is constantly reminding the audience not to take any of it too literally. The result is a movie that blends multiple tones at once, part action spectacle, part romantic comedy, part satire of relationships in spy movies. Sometimes that mix works perfectly, creating a fast, energetic ride. In those moments, the film feels like a confident balancing act, where the humor enhances the action, and the action intensifies the romantic tension between the characters. The shifting tone keeps the audience slightly off balance, never quite sure whether the next scene will lean toward comedy, conflict, or explosive spectacle. Other times it feels uneven, as if the film can't quite decide what it wants to be. The transitions between humor and action occasionally feel abrupt, and the narrative sometimes prioritizes spectacle over emotional clarity. But even when the tonal balance wobbles, the film maintains a sense of momentum. Its energy rarely fades, and the constant escalation of conflict keeps the story moving forward. But one thing is clear: Mr. and Mrs. Smith was never trying to be subtle. It was built to be big, loud, ridiculous fun. The film embraces a kind of cinematic excess that treats explosions, gunfights, and witty arguments as equally important parts of the experience. It doesn't aim for quiet realism or intricate storytelling. Instead, it focuses on creating a bold, entertaining spectacle built around personality, conflict, and style. And at the center of all that chaos are two of Hollywood's biggest stars trying to turn bullets and banter into something unforgettable. Let's be honest, the real reason most people watched Mr. and Mrs. Smith wasn't the spy story. It was Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, two of the biggest stars in the world, sharing the screen for the first time, and the movie knows it. From the very first scene, it's clear that this film is built around one central idea: watching these two stars together. Their presence shapes the entire structure of the film, turning even simple conversations into moments designed to highlight their personalities. At the time of the film's release, both actors were already global icons. Brad Pitt had spent years building a reputation as one of Hollywood's most charismatic leading men. His career had already demonstrated an ability to shift between intense drama and effortless charm, giving him a screen presence that could dominate almost any scene. Angelina Jolie had become equally famous for her commanding screen presence, physical confidence, and magnetic intensity. Her performances often carried an edge of danger, making her particularly suited for roles that required both elegance and unpredictability. Putting them together instantly turned the film into an event. It wasn't just a casting choice. It was the movie's main selling point. The film essentially builds its entire identity around the expectation that audiences want to see these two personalities collide. The marketing campaign understood that dynamic perfectly, presenting the film as a showcase for star power rather than a conventional narrative-driven thriller. And visually, the film leans into that completely. Every frame highlights their glamour. The camera lingers on their entrances, their style, their body language. They're photographed like living magazine covers. Lighting, costume design, and camera angles all work together to emphasize their status as larger-than-life figures. Even during action scenes, there's a clear awareness that the audience is watching two famous faces whose image carries as much weight as the characters themselves. The movie isn't just showing characters, it's showcasing movie stars. But the real question is whether their chemistry actually works, and for many viewers, it absolutely does. John and Jane's relationship is built on a strange mixture of attraction, rivalry, and playful hostility. They flirt while arguing, they joke while fighting, they threaten each other while clearly enjoying the tension between them. Their interactions often feel like a competitive game, where each line of dialogue is an attempt to outmaneuver the other emotionally or intellectually. That push-and-pull dynamic becomes the emotional engine of the film. The relationship thrives on contradiction. Moments of affection exist right beside moments of conflict, and the characters seem to enjoy provoking each other as much as they enjoy working together. That mixture of competition and attraction gives their scenes a constant sense of energy. Brad Pitt approaches the role with a relaxed, almost mischievous attitude. Instead of playing John Smith as a traditional action hero, he leans into the comedy. He delivers sarcastic one-liners with perfect timing. His facial expressions and reactions often turn simple moments into jokes. It's a performance that feels playful and self-aware. Pitt gives the impression that John enjoys the absurdity of his own life, reacting to danger with a kind of amused detachment that makes the character unexpectedly funny. Angelina Jolie brings a completely different energy. Jane Smith is elegant, dangerous, and perfectly controlled. She moves with confidence, fights with precision, and dominates the screen with sheer presence. Where Pitt plays loose and humorous, Jolie plays sharp and powerful. Her character carries an aura of quiet authority, as if she is always one step ahead of everyone around her. That contrast is part of what makes their scenes together interesting. Pitt's relaxed charm collides with Jolie's intense focus, creating a dynamic where neither character ever fully controls the interaction. The imbalance of their styles becomes a source of tension and humor at the same time. Of course, not everyone agrees about the chemistry. Some viewers see sparks flying between the two stars. Others feel that the movie relies on their celebrity status more than actual emotional connection. In certain scenes, the film seems content to simply place the actors in stylish situations and trust that their presence alone will carry the moment. But one thing is undeniable. When Pitt and Jolie share the screen, you can't look away. Their combined presence creates a magnetic pull that keeps the audience engaged even when the story begins to wander into increasingly exaggerated territory. In many ways, Mr. and Mrs. Smith isn't really about the plot. It's about watching two charismatic stars challenge, tease, and outplay each other. Their banter, their rivalry, their attraction. That dynamic is what keeps the movie alive, even when the story becomes completely ridiculous. The narrative often feels like a framework, designed to give these two performers opportunities to clash and collaborate in increasingly entertaining ways. But while Pitt and Jolie dominate the spotlight, there's one supporting actor who manages to steal a surprising number of scenes. While Mr. and Mrs. Smith clearly belongs to Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, they aren't the only people trying to steal the spotlight, because surrounding the glamorous assassin couple is a supporting cast that adds humor, chaos, and a few unexpected moments to the film. These characters may not receive the same narrative attention, but they help shape the world around John and Jane, providing glimpses into the larger network of operatives and handlers that exist behind the scenes. And in one particular case, someone almost walks away with the movie. Most of the supporting characters in Mr. and Mrs. Smith exist to support the main story. They help move the plot forward. They represent the mysterious agencies behind the assassins, and occasionally they deliver information that pushes John and Jane deeper into the conflict. Their roles often function as narrative bridges, guiding the protagonists toward their next mission or complication. But the film never allows these characters to dominate the narrative. The focus always comes back to the central couple. There is one major exception: Vince Vaughn. Playing John's associate Eddie, Vaughn brings a completely different energy into the film. Where Pitt and Jolie operate with sleek confidence and controlled intensity, Vaughn shows up with rapid-fire dialogue, sarcastic humor, and chaotic personality. He talks fast. His conversations feel like a constant stream of jokes, observations, and exaggerated reactions. The character injects an unpredictable comedic rhythm into scenes that might otherwise remain focused purely on action or tension. He jokes constantly, and he rarely takes anything seriously. The result: some of the film's most genuinely funny moments belong to him. His dialogue often arrives in rapid bursts, filled with sarcastic remarks and exaggerated reactions that feel almost improvised. While the central story revolves around secrecy, danger, and escalating conflict, his presence introduces a completely different emotional texture. The humor he brings isn't polished or elegant. It's messy, spontaneous, and slightly chaotic, which makes it stand out even more against the film's otherwise sleek aesthetic. His character acts almost like a contrast to the polished world of the Smiths. John and Jane are stylish, glamorous assassins. Eddie feels messy, unpredictable, and completely unfiltered. The difference is visible not just in the way he speaks, but in how he occupies the screen. While the main characters move with calculated confidence, Eddie seems to bounce through scenes with restless energy, as if he's constantly improvising his way through dangerous situations. That contrast gives the film a different rhythm whenever he appears. Scenes involving the Smiths often carry a certain cool precision, built around carefully staged tension and controlled performances. But when Eddie enters the conversation, the mood loosens instantly. The dialogue speeds up. The atmosphere becomes less controlled, more spontaneous. His presence disrupts the carefully maintained tone of the film in a way that feels refreshing. In a movie that often takes its own coolness very seriously, Vaughn injects some much-needed looseness. His character functions almost like a release valve, allowing the audience to step away from the intense back-and-forth between the central couple. Instead of sleek espionage professionalism, he represents the slightly absurd side of the assassin world, someone who treats life-or-death situations with casual indifference and relentless humor. Beyond Vaughn, several other actors appear throughout the film. Characters connected to the rival assassin agencies help build the world around John and Jane's secret lives. These figures hint at the larger infrastructure operating behind the scenes, organizations that recruit operatives, assign missions, and quietly manipulate events from the shadows. Their presence expands the scope of the story, reminding the audience that the Smiths are only small pieces of a much larger system. They represent the organizations that train them, assign their missions, and eventually turn against them. These shadowy groups embody the cold logic of the professional assassin world, where loyalty exists only as long as an operative remains useful. The moment John and Jane become unpredictable, the same institutions that once relied on them begin treating them as expendable threats. But these characters rarely receive much development. Most of them appear briefly, deliver key information, and then disappear as the story moves forward. Their purpose is largely functional, guiding the narrative toward its next conflict rather than existing as fully realized personalities. The film gives them just enough presence to establish the stakes without allowing them to overshadow the central relationship. That's one of the film's limitations. Because the story is so focused on the central couple, the supporting cast never really gets the chance to become fully developed characters. Their motivations remain vague, their personalities lightly sketched. They operate more like narrative devices than individuals with their own arcs or perspectives. They function more like pieces of the plot. They help create obstacles, deliver missions, and raise the stakes, but they rarely become memorable in their own right. The film is less interested in exploring the internal politics of these secret agencies and more interested in watching the Smiths react to the chaos those agencies create. And honestly, that might be intentional, because Mr. and Mrs. Smith was never designed as an ensemble film. It's a two-star showcase. Everything in the movie, from the story to the action to the supporting characters, exists mainly to keep the spotlight on John and Jane. The narrative repeatedly circles back to their relationship, ensuring that every conflict ultimately becomes another test of their connection. But once the supporting cast steps aside, the film unleashes the element it relies on more than anything else. Explosive action. If there's one thing Mr. and Mrs. Smith never runs out of, its action. Gunfights, car chases, explosions, knife fights. The movie doesn't just sprinkle action into the story, it builds the entire experience around it. The film treats action as its primary storytelling language, using spectacle not just to entertain, but to express the emotional volatility between its central characters. Once John and Jane discover each other's secret identities, the film shifts gears instantly. What begins as a marital argument quickly turns into something far more destructive. The tone of the narrative changes almost immediately, transforming the domestic setting into a battlefield where every disagreement escalates into physical confrontation, and the action starts escalating fast. Every new scene seems determined to be bigger, louder, and more chaotic than the last. The film moves with the mindset of a blockbuster determined to constantly raise the stakes, layering one spectacle on top of another to maintain momentum. The most memorable set piece in the film happens inside their own home. Instead of having a typical argument, John and Jane settle their differences the only way two professional assassins know how. With guns, knives, fists, and anything else they can grab, the fight transforms their carefully maintained domestic environment into a war zone where nothing remains untouched. Their perfectly designed suburban house becomes a war zone. Furniture gets destroyed, walls collapse, bullets tear through everything. The space that once symbolized comfort and stability turns into a visual representation of their fractured relationship. It's part action sequence and part twisted relationship therapy. What makes that fight so entertaining isn't just the destruction, it's the emotional tension underneath it. Every punch and every shot fired carries the weight of years of frustration and hidden secrets. Each attack becomes a kind of confession, revealing pieces of resentment and disappointment that had been buried beneath polite routines. They aren't just fighting to survive, they're fighting through everything that has been wrong with their marriage. The violence becomes symbolic, representing the emotional barriers they built over time. Every broken object feels like the physical manifestation of unresolved arguments and unspoken frustrations. But the movie doesn't stop there. Once John and Jane realize they've been set up by their own organizations, the scale of the action grows even larger. The personal conflict that began inside their home suddenly expands into a broader battle against the very system that once controlled their lives. Suddenly, they're being hunted by waves of professional assassins. The quiet secrecy of their previous missions disappears, replaced by relentless pursuit and escalating confrontations. And that leads to some massive set pieces, high-speed car chases, desert shootouts, and highway battles involving entire teams of attackers. These sequences push the film firmly into blockbuster territory, emphasizing scale and spectacle over subtlety. The film constantly raises the stakes. Each new encounter introduces greater danger and more elaborate action choreography, as if the movie is determined to outdo itself with every sequence. Of course, realism isn't really the point here. The action is exaggerated and often completely over the top. Bullets fly everywhere, explosions happen constantly, and somehow, John and Jane manage to survive situations that would be impossible in the real world. But that's part of the film's style. It's not trying to be believable, it's trying to be exciting. The film operates within a heightened reality where spectacle matters more than plausibility, allowing the filmmakers to prioritize entertainment over strict logic. At its best, the action feels creative and energetic. The choreography is fast, the camera movement keeps things dynamic, and the spectacle is undeniably entertaining. The sequences are designed to keep the audience visually engaged, using movement, destruction, and clever staging to maintain excitement. But as the movie goes on, the constant explosions and gunfire can start to feel overwhelming. When action becomes continuous, it risks losing the sense of danger that makes it exciting in the first place. The more the action escalates, the less tension there is, because deep down you already know the stars aren't going anywhere. The spectacle becomes predictable in its outcome, even if the path toward that outcome remains entertaining. And that's where the movie's real strength returns, because when the bullets stop flying, the film relies on something just as powerful: the humor between John and Jane. For a movie filled with bullets, explosions, and assassins, one of the most important weapons in Mr. and Mrs. Smith is actually humor. The dialogue between the characters often carries just as much weight as the action sequences, providing moments of relief between bursts of violence. Because while John and Jane are trying to kill each other, they're also constantly making jokes. Their conversations transform deadly confrontations into strangely playful exchanges where sarcasm becomes a form of emotional connection. And that strange mix of danger and sarcasm is what gives the film much of its personality. Without that humor, the constant violence could easily become exhausting. The comedy softens the edges of the conflict, turning potentially brutal situations into moments of character-driven entertainment. The humor in Mr. and Mrs. Smith begins with the premise itself: a married couple discovering that they're both professional killers. The sheer absurdity of that situation creates endless opportunities for ironic dialogue and awkward realizations. That idea alone opens the door to a lot of comedy. Instead of normal marital arguments about chores or communication, their disagreements involve gunfights and explosives. The familiar frustrations of married life are exaggerated to absurd levels, transforming everyday relationship conflicts into cinematic battles. It's everyday relationship conflict, just pushed to a completely ridiculous extreme. But the real source of humor comes from the way John and Jane talk to each other. Even during the most dangerous moments, their conversations reveal a strange familiarity and competitive playfulness that keeps their interactions engaging. Their dialogue becomes a constant negotiation between affection and irritation, turning even life-or-death confrontations into oddly entertaining exchanges. Their dialogue is filled with sarcasm, teasing, and competitive one-liners. Even in the middle of life-or-death situations, they never stop trading verbal jabs. They flirt, they mock each other, they challenge each other, and sometimes those conversations happen while they're literally destroying their own house. The rhythm of their exchanges feels almost like a verbal duel running parallel to the physical fight, where every insult and comeback becomes another move in the battle between them. One of the film's clever tricks is mixing humor directly into the action scenes. Instead of stopping the movie for a joke, the comedy happens during the chaos. Gunshots are followed by sarcastic remarks. Knife fights turn into sarcastic arguments. The tension between the characters becomes part of the entertainment. Their dialogue keeps running even as the action escalates, turning violent confrontations into strangely playful exchanges. It's not just about who wins the fight, it's about who gets the last word. The characters seem almost as invested in outsmarting each other verbally as they are in surviving the encounter. Every comeback carries a hint of competitive pride, as if neither of them wants to admit defeat in any form, whether physical or conversational. The film also leans into a classic action movie tradition, the one-liner. Many of the jokes feel inspired by the style of spy movies like James Bond, where characters deliver witty remarks immediately after something explosive happens. A dangerous situation suddenly turns into a punchline. The humor becomes a way of punctuating the action, allowing the film to maintain its energetic pace without drifting into grim seriousness. That playful tone keeps the film from becoming too dark or serious. Without that humor, the movie might feel exhausting. There's a lot of violence, a lot of destruction, and a lot of chaos. The banter between John and Jane gives the audience something else to enjoy. It introduces a layer of personality that prevents the action from feeling repetitive. It reminds us that the story isn't just about assassins, it's about a relationship. And relationships, no matter how dysfunctional, often involve humor. Even when two people are arguing, teasing and sarcasm can sometimes become a strange form of communication. The film exaggerates that idea by turning arguments into literal combat, but the underlying dynamic still feels recognizable. Of course, the jokes don't always land perfectly. Some lines rely heavily on the charm of the actors rather than the strength of the writing. Certain moments work more because of timing and delivery than because the dialogue itself is particularly clever. But that's often the nature of star-driven comedy. A charismatic performer can elevate a simple line into something memorable. But when the timing works, the banter between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie becomes one of the most entertaining parts of the entire film. Their interactions carry a natural rhythm that makes the rivalry feel playful rather than hostile. Instead of genuine hatred, there's always a sense that both characters are enjoying the challenge. But humor alone can't hide one of the movie's biggest problems, because once you start paying attention to the story itself, some things begin to fall apart. Now here's where Mr. and Mrs. Smith starts to stumble. Because the moment you stop enjoying the explosions and actually start thinking about the story, a lot of things suddenly don't make sense. The film moves so quickly and confidently that it often distracts from its own logical gaps. But once you pause to examine the narrative more closely, the structure begins to feel surprisingly fragile. Let's start with the biggest question. How do two highly trained professional assassins live together for years, share the same house, share the same bed, and somehow never realize what the other person actually does? These are supposed to be elite killers, people trained to notice everything, professionals who survive by paying attention to small details. Their entire careers depend on awareness, observation, and suspicion. And yet neither of them suspects the truth about the person closest to them. It's a fun idea, but logically, it's extremely hard to believe. The film asks the audience to accept a level of coincidence that borders on the impossible. For years, both characters managed to maintain secret identities without accidentally revealing anything that might raise suspicion. No strange schedules, no unexplained injuries, no unusual behavior that might trigger curiosity. Then there are the organizations behind them. The movie presents these mysterious assassin agencies with massive resources. They have armies of agents, advanced equipment, global operations. Their influence appears vast, suggesting institutions capable of coordinating complex missions across multiple locations. But the film never really explains how these groups operate or why they make the decisions they do. Their motives remain vague, and the rules of their world seem to change whenever the plot needs them to. One moment they appear calculating and strategic, and the next they behave in ways that seem strangely reckless. Take the main conflict of the story. The agencies discover that John and Jane are married. So what do? Instead of quietly separating them or reassigning them, they decide the best solution is to send both assassins on the same mission and let them kill each other. It's dramatic, but strategically, it's incredibly questionable. For organizations that supposedly specialize in secrecy and efficiency, the plan seems unnecessarily chaotic. Rather than solving the problem discreetly, they create a scenario almost guaranteed to spiral out of control. As the story moves forward, more plot holes start appearing. Entire teams of assassins suddenly show up. Massive shootouts happen in public places, and somehow these secret organizations manage to operate on a huge scale without attracting attention. The deeper you think about the world of the film, the less it seems to hold together. The narrative relies heavily on spectacle and momentum, often pushing logic aside in favor of the next big action sequence. Now, to be fair, the movie clearly isn't aiming for realism. It's built as a high-energy action comedy. And in that type of film, audiences are often willing to overlook logic problems if the entertainment is strong enough. Spectacle can sometimes compensate for narrative inconsistencies, especially when the tone encourages viewers to treat the story lightly. But that balance is tricky, because once the plot begins to feel too chaotic or inconsistent, the story loses some of its impact. When the rules of the world become unclear, it becomes harder for the audience to feel genuine tension. The frustrating part is that the core concept of Mr. and Mrs. Smith is actually very clever. A married couple discovering they are rival assassins is a great starting point. The idea has enormous potential for both comedy and emotional drama, but the script never fully develops that idea. Instead of building a deeper story around it, the film often relies on bigger action scenes to keep things moving. The narrative repeatedly shifts its focus towards spectacle rather than exploring the psychological consequences of the character's discovery, and that leads directly to another issue with the movie. Because as the explosions get bigger, the pacing of the story starts to feel uneven. One of the biggest problems with Mr. and Mrs. Smith isn't the action, it's the pacing. Because for a movie packed with explosions and gunfights, the rhythm of the story can feel surprisingly uneven. The film actually starts slower than many people expect. Instead of jumping straight into action, the opening spends time establishing John and Jane's marriage. We see their daily routine, their suburban life, and their awkward sessions with a marriage counselor. These scenes are meant to build the emotional foundation of the story. They show that the couple's relationship is already strained long before the secret identities are revealed. The film uses these early moments to highlight the distance between them, emphasizing how routine and boredom have quietly replaced excitement. But for some viewers, this introduction feels a little too slow. The film delays its central premise longer than expected, spending time on quiet domestic scenes that contrast sharply with the explosive action that eventually follows. For audiences expecting immediate spy thrills, that early pacing can feel slightly hesitant before the story finally shifts into high gear. Once the central twist arrives, when John and Jane discover each other's real professions, the movie suddenly shifts into high gear. From that moment on, the pace becomes much faster. Arguments turn into fights, fights turn into gun battles, and the story starts racing from one action sequence to the next. The quiet tension that defined the early scenes disappears almost instantly, replaced by a relentless sense of momentum. The film suddenly begins moving with the energy of a blockbuster that knows its premise has finally been revealed, and now it's time to fully unleash it. The film also pulls from the tradition of big Hollywood action movies, massive shootouts, car chases through city streets, armies of enemies appearing for the final battle. These elements give the movie the scale of a modern blockbuster, reinforcing the sense that the story belongs in the world of large-scale spectacle. But they also make the story feel familiar. Many of these moments echo scenes audiences have seen in other action films before. The movie assembles recognizable elements from multiple genres, blending them into a single narrative framework. Interestingly, even the title Mr. and Mrs. Smith has a history. There was an earlier film with the same name directed by Alfred Hitchcock in the 1940s. But aside from the title, the two movies have almost nothing in common. The older film was a romantic comedy focused on misunderstandings within a marriage. The modern version transforms that simple title into something far more explosive, attaching it to a story filled with espionage and large-scale action. So in many ways, Mr. and Mrs. Smith isn't reinventing a genre. Instead, it combines ideas from several different types of movies: spy thrillers, romantic comedies, action blockbusters. The film blends these influences together into one flashy package. It borrows the glamour of espionage cinema, the emotional conflict of relationship stories, and the spectacle of large-scale action films. Sometimes that mixture works perfectly. Other times it feels like the movie is borrowing more than it's creating. But beyond all the explosions and genre influences, the story is also trying to say something about marriage itself. And that's where the film's deeper themes begin to appear. Beneath all the explosions, gunfights, and car chases, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is actually exploring something surprisingly simple: marriage. But not the romantic version you see in fairy tales. This movie asks a different question. What happens when a relationship is built on secrets and performance instead of honesty? From the beginning, John and Jane Smith are playing roles. They act like the perfect suburban couple. They smile for neighbors. They follow a routine. They pretend their life together is normal. Their interactions appear polite, controlled, and predictable, almost as if they are performing a carefully rehearsed version of domestic happiness. Everything about their behavior suggests stability and familiarity, the kind of image many couples present to the outside world. But it's all an act. Behind that carefully constructed image, both of them are hiding their real identities. Their marriage isn't just struggling. It's based on two completely different lives being performed at the same time. The film quietly builds this contrast between appearance and reality, showing how easily a convincing performance can hide something far more complicated beneath the surface. The film constantly asks a simple but powerful question: Who are John and Jane Smith really? Are they the suburban husband and wife, or are they the ruthless assassins they become during their missions? The truth is, they are both. Each character lives with two identities, and the tension between those identities is what eventually tears their relationship apart. In public, they behave like an ordinary couple navigating everyday routines. In private professional spaces, they transform into highly skilled operatives capable of extreme violence and precision. These two versions of themselves exist side by side, but are never allowed to overlap. Every couple has things they hide, but in this story, those hidden truths are extreme. John hides a life filled with dangerous missions and deadly skills. Jane hides the exact same kind of secret. Their careers depend on deception, secrecy, and the ability to maintain convincing disguises. For years, they sit across the dinner table from each other without revealing who they really are. Their marriage becomes a space filled with unspoken truths. Instead of sharing their real experiences, they present edited versions of their lives, safe stories that maintain the illusion of normalcy. Over time, those omissions create emotional distance, leaving them disconnected even while living under the same roof. When those secrets finally come out, everything changes. The lies disappear, the masks fall away. And suddenly John and Jane are forced to confront the real people behind the roles they've been playing. The moment of discovery doesn't just expose their professions, it exposes the fragility of the relationship itself. If both partners have been performing a version of themselves for years, then the foundation of their marriage becomes uncertain. Ironically, the moment their marriage collapses is also the moment they finally become honest with each other. What makes the story interesting is how that honesty appears. Not through calm conversations, not through therapy, but through conflict. Through fighting, arguing, and surviving together, they finally start revealing the truth about their lives. The confrontations force them to abandon the polite disguises they maintained for so long. Instead of hiding behind carefully chosen words, they react instinctively, exposing emotions that had been buried beneath years of routine. It's messy, chaotic, and violent, but it's also the first time they actually connect. In a strange way, the film suggests something unexpected. Sometimes relationships fall apart because people stop showing who they really are. John and Jane spent years pretending to be someone else. Their identities as spies required them to perform roles constantly, and those habits slowly infected their personal relationship as well. Over time, authenticity disappeared, replaced by performance. Once those illusions disappear, their relationship becomes real again, even if that reality involves bullets and explosions. But while the movie touches on these deeper ideas, it often focuses more on something else entirely: style over substance. Here's the biggest debate surrounding Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Is it a clever action comedy with an interesting idea about marriage, or is it just a very stylish movie with very little beneath the surface? Because when you strip away the explosions, the gunfights, and the glamorous stars, the film raises one important question. Is this movie more about looking cool than actually telling a deep story? There's no denying that Mr. and Mrs. Smith looks incredible. The cinematography is polished. The action scenes are choreographed with precision. The sets, costumes, and locations all feel sleek and expensive. Every frame seems designed to make the movie feel glamorous. And of course, the camera constantly highlights its biggest assets: Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Their presence becomes a visual centerpiece for the film, with lighting, framing, and costume design emphasizing their star power. The film is built to look cool, but because the movie puts so much energy into spectacle, something else starts to fade into the background. The story itself, the central concept, two married assassins discovering each other's secret lives, is actually a brilliant idea. It carries the potential for emotional tension, psychological exploration, and even social commentary about trust and identity. It could explore trust, identity, deception, and relationships in really interesting ways. But instead of diving deeply into those themes, the film often chooses bigger explosions. There are moments where the story hints at something deeper. The marriage counseling scenes, the emotional tension between John and Jane, the idea that their relationship was built on lies. These moments suggest the film could have explored its characters in a more meaningful way. They briefly open the door to deeper reflection about honesty, vulnerability, and the difficulties of truly knowing another person. But those ideas rarely last long. Soon the movie returns to another action sequence. And in many ways, that's not surprising. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was designed as a major summer blockbuster. Movies like this are often built around excitement and entertainment rather than emotional complexity. They're meant to be fast, fun, and visually impressive. Depth becomes optional. Spectacle becomes the priority. But here's the thing: sometimes style is enough. Even if the story isn't deeply layered, the movie can still be entertaining because of its energy, humor, and star power. The sleek presentation creates an experience that feels exciting even when the narrative itself remains simple. The sleek visuals and charismatic performances make the experience enjoyable on a surface level. And for many audiences, that's exactly what they're looking for. So the real question becomes this: do you watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith expecting a deep story about relationships, or do you watch it for the spectacle, the humor, and the thrill of seeing two movie stars blow things up together? Because depending on what you expect, you might walk away with very different opinions about the film. And that leads to the final piece of the puzzle: how audiences actually experience the movie and why reactions to it can be so divided. Why do people have such different reactions to Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Some viewers walk away saying it's a fun, stylish action movie. Others say it's shallow, ridiculous, and completely unbelievable. So what's causing this divide? The answer is simple. It all depends on how you watch the movie. There are generally two kinds of audiences when it comes to films like this. The first group watches movies mainly to be entertained. They want excitement. They want humor. They want fast-paced action and charismatic stars. For these viewers, Mr. and Mrs. Smith works perfectly. It's energetic, it's funny at times, and it delivers plenty of spectacle. The film moves quickly, keeps the visuals exciting, and constantly places its charismatic leads at the center of the experience. For audiences who value entertainment above strict realism, that combination can be more than enough. But then there's the second group. These viewers want something more from a movie. They look for strong storytelling, logical plots, characters with depth. They tend to analyze how a narrative is structured, how its world operates, and whether the story's internal logic actually holds together. And when they watch Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they start noticing all the problems: the unrealistic premise, the plot holes, the moments where the story sacrifices logic for another explosion. Once those elements come into focus, the illusion of the film's world can start to weaken. What once felt exciting might suddenly feel exaggerated, and scenes designed for spectacle might begin to feel disconnected from the narrative itself. The key to enjoying the film is suspension of disbelief. You have to accept the absurdity of the situation: a married couple secretly working as assassins, entire armies of enemies appearing out of nowhere, characters surviving impossible situations. If you try to analyze every detail, the movie begins to fall apart. But if you watch it as pure entertainment, the experience changes. The ridiculous moments become part of the fun. The exaggerated action becomes part of the movie's personality rather than a flaw. The film transforms from something meant to be analyzed into something meant to be enjoyed. The action becomes exciting rather than unrealistic. And the chemistry between the stars becomes the main attraction. In that mindset, the movie works exactly as intended. It becomes a playful action spectacle driven by personality and energy rather than narrative precision. Ultimately, Mr. and Mrs. Smith was never designed to be a deeply thoughtful film. It was designed to be fun, a flashy Hollywood blockbuster, a mix of action, humor, and star power. Something you can sit back and enjoy without thinking too hard about the details. And when you look at the movie through that lens, the final question becomes clear. After all the explosions, the chaos, and the star power, is Mr. and Mrs. Smith actually a good movie? So after everything, the explosions, the gunfights, the arguments, the flirting, and the chaos, what do we actually make of Mr. and Mrs. Smith? Is it a great movie? Or is it simply a flashy Hollywood spectacle carried by two very famous stars? There's no question about the film's greatest strength: Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Their screen presence dominates the movie from beginning to end. The camera repeatedly centers on their interactions, allowing their personalities to drive the film even when the narrative itself becomes unpredictable. Even when the story becomes absurd or the plot begins to wobble, their charisma keeps the film entertaining. They argue, tease, flirt, and fight with a kind of playful energy that makes the entire concept work far better than it probably should. Without them, the film would feel very different. And when the movie is working, it can be genuinely fun. The action scenes are big and energetic. The humor occasionally lands perfectly. And the central idea, a married couple discovering their rival assassins, is clever enough to keep audiences curious. There are moments where the film's mix of action, romance, and comedy feels perfectly balanced. During those scenes, the movie finds its ideal tone: fast, stylish, and playful without trying to take itself too seriously. But the film also struggles in several important ways. The story often lacks depth, the script leaves too many questions unanswered, and the action sometimes overwhelms the emotional core of the relationship. Instead of fully exploring the fascinating concept at its center, the film often chooses spectacle over substance. In many ways, Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a movie built on style. It's sleek, it's glamorous. It's packed with visually impressive moments, but beneath that polished surface, the storytelling isn't always as strong as the concept promises. The film often feels more like a showcase for its stars than a fully developed narrative. And yet, the movie still works for many people, because sometimes audiences aren't looking for deep storytelling. Sometimes they just want a fast, entertaining ride, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith delivers that. It's loud, playful, and full of spectacle. In the end, Mr. and Mrs. Smith isn't a masterpiece, but it also isn't a failure. It's a stylish, energetic Hollywood blockbuster that survives on charisma, action, and the undeniable appeal of its two stars. A movie where love, violence, and humor collide in one very chaotic marriage, and sometimes that's enough. Final verdict. After all the explosions, betrayals, and intense confrontations, the big question remains. Is Mr. and Mrs. Smith actually worth watching? The short answer is absolutely. What makes this movie stand out isn't just the action. Plenty of films have gunfights, car chases, and spectacular explosions. What truly makes this story memorable is the unique concept at its core. A married couple secretly working as assassins, both hiding the exact same dangerous life from each other. It's a premise that instantly creates tension, humor, and unpredictability all at the same time. One of the film's greatest strengths is the chemistry between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Their performances bring a natural charm and playful intensity to every scene. Whether they're arguing across the dinner table or firing weapons at each other in the middle of their living room, their dynamic keeps the film constantly engaging. The action sequences are another major highlight. The fights are fast, stylish, and creative, especially the famous house battle scene, where their entire home becomes a battlefield. Moments like this give the movie a fun, over-the-top energy that perfectly matches its tone. But the film isn't perfect. Some viewers feel that the larger spy world plot isn't explored very deeply. The mysterious organizations they work for remain mostly in the background, and the story focuses much more on the relationship than on the espionage itself. However, that's also part of the film's charm, because at its heart, Mr. and Mrs. Smith isn't really about spies. It's about a relationship. It's about secrets, trust, honesty, and what happens when two people finally stop pretending to be someone they're not. If you enjoy movies that combine action, humor, and strong character chemistry, this film delivers exactly that. It's entertaining, it's stylish, and it never takes itself too seriously. So whether you're watching it for the explosive action, the clever premise, or the unforgettable performances, Mr. and Mrs. Smith remains a movie that's easy to enjoy and hard to forget. Because sometimes the most dangerous mission of all is simply trying to make a marriage work.